So I want to switch gears a little bit from this morning, where we're looking at the ArcGIS system in the state of play where we currently are today, and we want to share with you some of where we're going. Now, whenever I look at the road ahead, I treat this as a bit like a weather forecast. You know, there's certain things that we know pretty sure are coming, and those are the things that are close by. And then as it gets further out, there becomes just more uncertainty. And so I try and be transparent with you about what we know and where we know it, and let you interpolate the rest. But we do want to share with you today, you know, some of the cutting-edge stuff that we're working on, and some of the themes and the reasons why we're doing that. And Matthew will come up shortly and talk a little bit about that. But firstly, I just want to look at what is in the upcoming releases for ArcGIS. So at Esri, we commit a huge amount to research and development. We put hundreds of millions of dollars into R&D each year. And the approach that we take is one of continuous improvement. So we try and get these innovations to you quickly through incremental releases. And subsequently, that means throughout the year, there are lots and lots of releases of our technology. And actually, before the end of this year, we're going to see a new release of ArcGIS Enterprise 11.2, of ArcGIS Pro 3.2, and ArcGIS Online, all scheduled before the end of the year. So let's just walk through those, and let's have a look at some of the things that are coming. So starting with ArcGIS Pro, we released ArcGIS Pro 3.1 back in February of this year. And at that point in time, the ArcGIS Pro team put together this roadmap. Now that's quite normal. You can go on Esri Community, you can find this roadmap. We've done this lots of times before. And what they do is they create these three columns, near, mid, and long-term aspirations for features and functions that we want to bring into the product. And when we're looking at near term, we're really looking at the next two releases. So we're looking at what's coming in Pro 3.2 and what's coming in Pro 3.3. But I've updated this slide with some blue dots just to confirm for you today what is now going to be coming in 3.2, which is next month. So you can see the Pro team have done a really good job because they've hit about 70% of the developments of the new features and functions that they aim to put into the next two releases. About 70% of those are coming in just to the next release, which is a really good job. It includes the most requested feature this time out, which was the discard for non-versioned editing right at the top there. So what that means is if you're editing in Pro and you're editing non-version data and you're in an edit session, whenever you make an edit at the moment, that edit will be committed to the database. Whereas the request, and what will be the case next month, is actually when you're in this edit session and you're making your edits, you can choose whether to discard or keep those edits before you then make a final commit. This is the way that ArcMap worked, and so it's a workflow that we're bringing forward by popular request into Pro. There's lots of other stuff down here as well. Things like 64-bit object IDs allow us to work with billions of records. There is support for 3D tiles. There's support coming natively into Pro now for oriented imagery. In fact, I can share that with you. It looks like this. So you can see on the right-hand side, as the oriented imagery is dragged around, you can see the footprint on the map is updating as well. So that's what it will look like integrated in. There's a couple other things that I can share with you as well. These aren't coming next month, but look out for them sometime next year. The first one is some new geoprocessing tools for 3D flood analysis modeling visualization. So that's a sneak peek video of what some of that will look like, probably to the middle of next year sometime. And then there's also a presentation mode coming into ArcGIS Pro natively, ability to build slides from your content and then present natively within Pro. Again, that's not coming next month, but look out for that sometime next year as well. Okay, looking forward to ArcGIS Enterprise then. Some of the themes around the development of ArcGIS Enterprise, I sort of touched on this a little bit this morning. They're around adopting modern approaches for the delivery of technology. So putting a lot of work into cloud-optimized and cloud-native approaches. Well, what does that mean? Well, cloud-native is like what I spoke about this morning, taking advantages of cloud technology which allow us to do things in a way that is more efficient, more effective, more scalable, more performant than we could do before. Because it's different taking a piece of software that was available and worked pre-cloud And then making it work in the cloud is pretty straightforward. But actually architecting, thinking, actually, okay, we've got the cloud ecosystem, let's build something specifically to take advantage of that. That's a different approach. And they are the sort of approaches which we're now taking. And that's why Kubernetes is going to be so important in the future. So what are some of these cloud-native attributes? Things like the ability to take advantage of almost infinite scaling. You know, if you think about the license model of ArcGIS Enterprise and the traditional access to hardware on a traditional on-premise system, it's constrained deliberately. Your license model matches the fact that you know how much hardware you're going to purchase. That's not the case in the cloud. So ArcGIS Enterprise on Kubernetes is licensed differently to allow you to scale with agility. Another thing you can do is it takes advantage of something called containerization and microservices. So think of this like taking ArcGIS Enterprise, imagine it's like a big square, and carving it up into lots of tiny little squares, and then choosing which ones of those you want to scale with much more agility. Maybe you only need a little bit more capacity in serving certain types of service, but you don't need more capacity everywhere else. It's the ability to actually optimize the management and the deployment of the system. It's things like being able to have better insight in analytics of how that system is being used in real time, monitoring, alerting, and those sorts of things. So, and strong DevOps support as well. You know, for deployment, for upgrade. One of the big benefits of Kubernetes is we can upgrade in situ with no downtime. Now, that's been a real challenge for us in traditional systems. Even in our managed cloud services team, we've done a huge amount of work to optimize this workflow. There's a point in time where you still have to take that system offline in order to upgrade it. And that's not the case with cloud-native approaches. So that's just an example of where we are changing the way that we build technology to bring modern approaches into our development cycles. And on the other hand, we're looking at cloud-optimized approaches. Well, what does this mean? This means that this ArcGIS Enterprise and Kubernetes is not the only way of doing things. Actually, you know, it's an additional option that sits alongside our deployment options on Windows and Linux to give us more flexibility. So Windows and Linux deployments are going to be around, you know, for a very long time. There's still lots of validity there, and the vast majority of all ArcGIS Enterprise deployment worldwide is on Windows and Linux. So this is about taking those approaches and thinking, okay, how can we improve them? How can we streamline the installation process, for example? There's a lot of work that's going into that to make that more efficient and simpler. How can we make sure that, okay, the upgrade process might be complicated, but we can simplify it. We can take steps towards making it easier. And so that's where a lot of the focus is going into some of those more traditional deployments. Rancher support for Kubernetes is about managing these clusters at scale with more agility. So that is coming at the next version of Enterprise. I've talked a bit about deployment upgrade improvements. The other thing that we're doing in the Windows and Linux versions is introducing beta features in 11.2. So you might remember this when we released ArcGIS Enterprise 11.0. For the first time, we wrapped some beta features into the production release. So they're not ready for production use, but the idea was to give you early sight of what was coming, to allow you to test those features and to choose to turn them on and use them in non-production workflows, and then for you to give us your feedback. And then the aim for us really is to take that feedback and make sure that we can, as much as possible, deploy those features if they're ready in the next version. So that was at 11.1, for example. So service webhooks is an example of something that we did at 11.0 and then in beta, and then we got your feedback, and at 11.1 it's in production. So we're going to be doing that again at 11.2, and we'll really ask for your feedback and your evaluation of some of those things. Now, I don't know exactly what some of those things are, so here's your weather forecast. But these are some of the things that we are working on in some of our beta programs. So it's a fair chance that some of these things will be ready to turn into beta features in the next release next month. So one of them, story map briefings. That's about, you just heard the team talking about story maps in the previous session. Story maps briefings is a story maps template that's specifically designed to be taken into a briefing session. So it's about bringing a simple view of real-time data from your portal, perhaps to a tablet or a phone type approach in order to be able to brief a small group of people. So that is something that we are looking at. We're also looking at a metadata editor that adopts internationally recognized open standards. That's something that we're working on. We're working on feature service synchronization for edits. That means if you're editing live to a feature service, you'll be able to replicate that to multiple feature services. So that's something that we're working on. And then oriented imagery. You just saw that in Pro. Well, we're looking at how do we bring that into service-based provision in ArcGIS Enterprise as well. So like I say, I don't know what exactly is going to be coming in 11.2 in beta, but these are some of the candidates. And if they don't fall into beta features at 11.2, again, look out for them sometime next year. They are probably coming. Let's look forward to ArcGIS Online then. Some of the key themes around the development of ArcGIS Online are about accessibility, about resilience, and the enterprise nature of ArcGIS Online as a system. So let's just look at these one at a time. So you might be aware that just a couple of months ago, we released, for example, accessible color palettes for coding in Arcade. So these now conform to the WCAG 2.0 guidelines for contrast for visual accessibility. So there's a lot more scrutiny and a lot of work going into making sure that our software is accessible to a broader audience as possible. And that really fits in with one of the themes I talked about this morning. So there's lots of stuff going on there. In terms of resilience, we're looking at introducing a restore deleted items option. So work a little bit like a recycle bin on a PC or perhaps your photo stream on your phone. When you delete a photo, it doesn't do a hard delete. It moves it into a folder that you don't normally see. It comes out of your timeline. But if you want to restore that within a time period, you can go and get it back. Same principle with items in ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online is used throughout the world in what I would call enterprise workflows. I don't mean ArcGIS Enterprise, I mean enterprise IT, significantly professional end-to-end workflows. And actually, this is about maturing some of the resilience capabilities within ArcGIS Online to acknowledge that actually, it is a genuinely scalable, capable production system that is being used in mission-critical work. And so we're working on more things around the enterprise nature of ArcGIS Online as a system. Another one of those is about monitoring, reporting, and analytics. As administrators, you want to understand what is going on in your ArcGIS Online subscription. Who is using what and when, and which items are being consumed. Are they the items you expected to be consumed? And if not, how not? Why not? Or, I think we can improve how we provide those sorts of analytical tools to you to give you better insight on the use of the system. We're great at providing insight in GIS, as a system of insight, but this isn't about that. This is about insight into the use of the tool set. And then the final one on there is around credit governance. Again, I think we've done a lot of work on providing you tools to manage credits on an individual by individual basis. So we've put, you can set a credit allowance for an individual user and you can manage that as an administrator. And that's all good, but we haven't really thought about it from the point of view of the whole subscription. So today, if you use up all of your credits, you can continue to go into negative credits and continue to make use of credit-consuming activities. And actually, when we step back from that, we think that's not really providing you with the tools for good governance of your organization. Actually, if you're an administrator, you probably want to know, when your credits are getting low and think about, well, did I expect that to happen, or has that happened by accident, and why has that happened, and I should be digging into that. And so you're going to see some changes here. We're going to introduce alerts and email notifications for breaching certain credit thresholds at multiple levels to give you just time and exposure to what's happening and to allow you to go and dig into that. You might want to purchase more credits. You might want to adjust credit allocations for some of your users, or you might just want to reduce your credit-consuming activities. So one of the calls to action here is actually you might be operating an ArcGIS Online account, and today it might be in negative credits. You might not even know. So go and have a look, and if it is, just bring it back up to the positive, because then you'll be able to take advantage of these tools when they're there. Okay, and looking further forward then, so some of what I've spoken about just now is about releases towards the end of this year. That was more towards the pro stuff earlier. Everything else I've talked about themes, and a lot of that stuff is coming next year and beyond. But we do have planned releases next year for ArcGIS Enterprise 11.3 and Pro 3.3. They will drop towards the middle of next year. And then ArcGIS Online is on the same release schedule as it has been this year. So that's going to be 3 releases in February, June, and October. So we've just been talking all down in the detail about feature functions, release cycles, and that's all good stuff. But I just want to spend a few moments and take a step back and look at some of the themes for how we're taking the ArcGIS system forwards. And really, when I think about what's the major theme that drives us in the development of our software, it's about simplifying access to GIS and providing it to wider groups of people at a simpler point of entry. And we've seen some of that happening throughout the day. Richard was talking about data pipelines. One of the ways he described it was we're taking features and functions that previously you would have had to know how to code in order to get access to, and we're supplying them through an interface that allows you, to do it in a drag and drop way. That's the sort of thing that we are focused on, bringing more and more capabilities into web clients and software as a service. And these two things together, software as a service and a web client like a browser, these really facilitate the simplification of access to GIS. And you can see this has been a theme for a long time. We saw in the plenary this morning ArcGIS Image for ArcGIS Online. That's bringing a full suite of professional imagery management capabilities to software as a service. You also saw you saw the process of Drone to Map. Drone to Map's not a SaaS product, but we have another product called SiteScan, which is taking exactly the same approach, photogrammetry and processing of raw data into information products via SaaS. And then ArcGIS Velocity brings real-time capabilities over SaaS. All of this focus and this pathway, is what we've been focused on for a long time. And really, one of the enablers for us taking this approach is the ability to do more work in the client, and particularly in the browser. So, by simplifying access and by doing more work on the client side, we can actually expose new ways of working that weren't possible before. So obviously, everyone's going to say yes to bigger, better, faster, but this isn't all just about efficiency and doing things faster. This is about unlocking new ways of working. So if you kind of flip that on its head, today, some of the applications that we are making, that we are building and that Matthew is about to come and show us, these are made possible purely because of the advancements that we're making in performance, in scalability, and doing more on the client side without server round trips, which limits or reduces the amount of time that it takes for processing, improves scalability, and those sorts of things. And so we're really, really excited to share some of this with you. We've never shown anybody these applications before, and so this is quite cutting edge. So we're really interested to get your feedback as well. But to take us through this now, I'd like to hand over to Matthew. Matthew's a GIS developer. He's working in our research team, and he's been specifically looking at how we can take advantage of these web-optimized client-side workflows to really supercharge some of our options. Matthew.
Thank you, Mark, and hello, everybody. We thought it would be worth shining some light on the advances that have been made in web-based technologies in this road ahead. So these technologies power the way we work over the internet, and in terms of performance and capability, have come a long way in the last few years. This has been reflected in browsers, the latest additions to ArcGIS Online, as well as in our own developer technologies. As Mark alluded to, these advancements have also brought new and dynamic ways of working with our data, and in turn are unlocking new insights about the world it represents. To help me tell this story, I'm going to show you a couple of concept applications that we've made in the research team, but first, a quick history lesson. As a lot of you will probably know, given the audience, the west of Scotland was once an industrial powerhouse for things like shipbuilding, arms manufacturing, and chemical production. As you can imagine, these activities aren't always the kindest on our environment, and so I'm interested in finding out what effect they've had on our landscape. I'll start with some aerial imagery, as you can see on screen, just to get the lay of the land around Irvine, as I know this was once an industrial hotspot. But as nature has taken back so much here, this doesn't really provide me with the clearest picture. So I'll switch to a digital terrain model, allowing me to see through all the buildings and vegetation to the surface beneath. As you can see, the hills to the north are well defined, but the coastal area, not so much. So how do I fix this? Well, there's probably a few things, but what I'm going to do is adjust the maximum symbolized elevation. Now, this is a huge data set at 50 centimeter resolution, so this may take a minute to load in again. But as it does, my perspective begins to change. We get higher definition at the mid-levels, but still, my picture of Irvine is a tad clouded. With a little bit of trial and error, something I don't really have time for today, I'm sure I'll be able to represent relief nicely in a few select areas. For this data exploration phase, though, I think I'm going to need something a little more dynamic. Don't get me wrong, ArcGIS Pro is powerful for performing a range of tasks, but sometimes what you need is a very specific tool for a very specific problem. Fortunately, I have just such a tool, imaginatively named DTM Explorer. So this is an app that I've developed that takes advantage of ultra-fast client-side rendering and really has to be seen on a screen like this to be fully appreciated. So, as I open up my DTM Explorer, I'm presented again with the same imagery. The hills to the north, again, are well defined, but the coastal areas not so much. So, adjusting the slider on the left, I can dynamically adjust the maximum elevation that's being symbolized, and all of a sudden, make out in fantastic detail the relief in the local area. Now, I was curious, and I'm sure you are as well, about what these little earth donuts are. So I went away and I did my research and found out that they actually belonged to Alfred Nobel's first UK dynamite factory. It's now derelict, but would go on to become the largest of its kind in the world. An explosive find, I think. Zooming out, though, I've created what I consider to be quite a pretty picture. But it's not all about creating cool desktop backgrounds to impress your friends and family. I mean, not entirely. When I first started developing this out, I thought this is going to be a great tool to render in my imagery quickly. It wasn't until I had to play around with it that I realized it's rendering in so quickly that it's actually transformed my static imagery into something with motion that can be interacted with. And then it dawned on me, this isn't about desktop backgrounds, oh no. This is about full motion screen recordings to spam your colleagues with. I'll show you. Zooming out, I'll head east. Change my color ramp. Pop on a blend mode. And take my gamma down a touch. If you're anything like me, you're probably sitting there wondering what gamma is. This just adds emphasis to particular colors in the color ramp. So, zooming in here, I'll bring my maximum elevation up a touch. Zoom in a little more. And just watch as I spill the ink over Pennycook. It's so mesmerizing that I have to keep reminding myself that all this is elevation represented as color, just done very, very quickly. But because this is real-world data, it can, of course, be used to understand real-world issues. So, zooming out, I'll switch to a more watery color ramp, take my gamma back up, and take my blend mode off. And as I watch, as the blue drains into the ocean, I begin to comprehend the network of streams and rivers that make up the region's drainage basins. One more time in case you missed it. Heading away from this watery world now, and with, I hope, an enhanced understanding for the dynamic nature of landscape, I'm going to take you through a quite different demo, again though, enabled by performance advancements in web-based technologies. So let's talk about data generalization. So put simply, this is the practice of simplifying detailed geographic data to improve performance and enhance visualization. Base maps provide us with a good example of this. At a high zoom level, I can make out individual buildings and the streets and lanes between them. As I zoom out though, my base map becomes more general. Buildings merge, some streets disappear, until I'm left with cities, major roads, and some shading to represent built-up areas. Now, the way this has traditionally been done is to create and store separate layers of data to represent the world at different scales. So, zooming in again, that's one layer to represent everything, another layer to merge the buildings, another layer to simplify the road network, and then another layer to represent the region at scale. I may have missed out a few there, but you get the idea. It's a whole load of data authoring and data management. Wouldn't it be great if I could just use a single data set that represented the world at its most detailed, and then let an application decide what to generalize? A bit of an abstract one, I know, so let me give you an example. Take our railways. Edinburgh Waverley, for example, features a whopping 20 platforms, each serviced by a complex jungle of switches and an assortment of shops, cafes, and offices. Now, I've got all my features here in my highly detailed data set, and at this zoom level, it's quite useful to have all this information. It's useful to see all the individual rails and the shops and the switches. But as I zoom out, my data quickly becomes muddy and confused. This is life without generalization, and it's not exactly pretty. So let's zoom in again and switch on some generalization. And as I zoom out, my data becomes more general. You're probably asking yourself, why is this so special? All he's drawn is some very simple shapes, applied some color, and come on stage to tell us about them. Well, yes, but the way that I've done this is quite different, and I think quite exciting. So what I've brought for you today is a proof of concept for a dynamic generalization approach that takes data at its highest detail and generalizes as the user interacts with it, eliminating the need for much of the data authoring and data management that goes into the traditional process. So I'll zoom in again and exaggerate the generalization so we can get a good look at the action. And as I zoom out, I'll talk you through the steps. So we zoom out. Individual rails are removed so that we've got lines to each platform and some of the major junctions and switches. Zooming out again, my tracks and buildings merge, leaving just the major routes to the platforms and some simple building outlines. I think it's important that we just take a step back here and marvel at the performance of this. This is performing hundreds, if not thousands, of complex geographical analysis functions per second to generalize and then redraw my data as I zoom in and out. And it happens in an instant. Zooming out again though, my app draws a very basic station outline before drawing everything at its most general. A single point with a single line running through it. And none of this I've had to author myself, only the highly detailed data, and then the rest has been generalized for me. I can give you another example. Perth Station has fictional plans to extend its main building and add a new 300-room hotel to cater to increased passenger demands. Naturally, we need to digitize these changes. Taking the traditional approach would require me to incorporate these changes into at least a handful of other layers. Taking the dynamic approach, I only need to draw them once. So I'll draw my extension to the main building, being very rough with that and creating what I think is quite a nice modern structure. I'll apply some basic attribution. before moving on to my hotel. So the keen-eyed among you will note that what I'm doing here would require building over what is a very old and very beautiful hotel. But it's not on the map, so how am I to know? I'll wait a moment for those changes to be applied, and then heading back into my app, we can see that those changes have come through. And then as I zoom out, we can see that they've been incorporated into each stage of my generalization process. The main building has been merged with its extension, and both form my very basic station outline. And all I've had to do here is edit my highly detailed data, and the app has taken care of the rest. What I've shown you this afternoon are products of the advancements that have been made in web-based technologies that continue to unlock for us new ways of working. DTM Explorer takes advantage of ultra-fast client-side rendering, and at a basic level, this allowed me to symbolize data faster, saving time when it came to exploring and presenting my imagery. At a higher level, though, it transformed my imagery from a static data set to something with motion that I was able to interact with to better understand the dynamic nature of landscape. My dynamic generalization proof of concept takes advantage of performance advancements in a very different way. Its output was hopefully familiar to most of us here, but the way in which this was achieved unlocks so many benefits behind the scenes. By letting the app generalize our single highly detailed data set for us, we can simplify data management and streamline data publishing. In turn, this makes our processes more efficient, firstly reducing the time spent on authoring multiple layers, and also, importantly, by using less compute power than you would if you were storing all this data, actually make generalization greener.